Hey, what's up, guys? Dark and Darker has been out for over a week now, but the U.S. and Korean court cases are still active. So what's going on? Will there be a rug pull? And what's been going on with the court case?
Wait, why is it not making me invisible? Am I? I don't feel invisible. Am I invisible? Okay, yeah, you're all invisible. Mine doesn't look invisible. I don't feel invisible. Do you feel invisible?
Yo, what's up, guys? It's Derp here with another video about the Dark and Darker court case. I'm sorry it's been a while since my last upload. I've been streaming a lot of Dark and Darker, and I've been on the Discord streaming with members, playing with people, members from the Patreon and the YouTube membership. So I've been hanging out there, doing some live streams, and just playing the game, kind of getting a feel for it now that it's actually live and it's actually here. I've kind of let some stuff brew and let some stuff develop and gathered my thoughts and looked over some court cases and spoken with some people much smarter than myself about what may or may not be going on. I have a ton of new content lined up for this week and next week. I hope you enjoy it. There's a lot of gameplay video, clips from my live streams and stuff like that, and stuff that I've just been doing off stream. Also some build guides and some updates on patch notes and stuff like that. So, but for this video, what I'm going to cover is that early access is live. So if you're not already in, how do we play? How do you download it? What do you do? Why did Ironmace choose to release now, or at least why I think they did? Is this going to upset the judge? Is the judge going to get pissed off about the decision to release Ironmace before there's any kind of injunction or any kind of court order that says it can or they cannot? Which leads into what is court decorum? This like status quo argument that some people have been making. What do they actually mean by that? And what is court decorum? What is a standard operating procedure for the court? And how does the court usually handle this type of thing? Which we'll get into what's actually been happening with the court case. What does early access mean for the court? What happens? I'm going to get into what happens next. So what are the next steps? What are we waiting on? What are we looking to see? Are we going to get any more information? Just what happens next, the next steps from here. Then I'm going to have a TLDR at the end with a quick timeline update. But before we get into the video, as always, I want to give a huge shout out to everybody who's been watching live, who's been subscribing, who's been leaving comments, and people who've been joining the guild through the Patreon and the YouTube membership. Massive thank you to everybody shown here for the supers, the subs, the memberships, and just in general, all of your support. You guys have really been showing up in the Discord, and we've been having a ton of fun games together. I love getting in there with all of you guys. It's just a blast. I love you guys. You guys are incredible. You guys are my boys. I can't do this without you guys. Because of you, I was able to help some other line holders get into the game by donating some funds to people in need who, have been going through some hard times, and I helped buy them purchases of the game. I've also been I'm going to upgrade my 10-year-old secondary monitor. So I'm using a TV, a 10-year-old old Dynex 720p TV that weighs like 35 pounds as my second monitor. So I'm going to be upgrading that soon to an actual, 144 hertz gaming monitor that I'm going to use as my primary. And that's all because of you guys. So thank you so very much. I really appreciate it. But yeah, let's get right into the video. So is early access live, and how do we play? Yes, it is. It is 100% live. It's not going away, at least hopefully. But we did it. We freaking did it. We held the line. We actually did it. We held the line. Early access has been released. And, it was a super sudden release and launch. It was just a one day thing. There was like kind of a day and a half of build up, and then it just boom, it launched. It was a little scuffed. I'll admit that at first, just because there's like upwards of 1 million people trying to download this, all from untested sites and stuff that hasn't been stress tested yet. But a large part of the reason why it was so scuffed is because of the massive player count, right? So we just kind of got to roll with that. It's a lot better now. If you haven't got it yet because you wanted to see how it went after launch, now would probably be the time to get it, just because things have settled down. And if you want to purchase the game, there are 2 places, but I'm only really going to mention and recommend one, and that's darkanddarker.com. Go directly. So Ironmace has created their own launcher called Blacksmith, and the launcher is pretty great as far as I'm concerned. It's just a standard launcher. It does what it needs to do. Other than some early issues with their payment provider and their website crashing and stuff like that, the launcher itself has been really decent. And that was all just due to unexpected bandwidth. There was also some issues with the uninstallation process. People were trying to uninstall and reinstall, and in the process of doing so, it seems like when you uninstalled the launcher at first, this has been fixed. But in the first week, for the first few days, if you uninstall the launcher, it would delete some files that weren't associated with the launcher. But that has been fixed now, at least to the best of my knowledge. It sucks that these issues happened, but it's kind of expected. Like, I'm not trying to cut them too much slack, but it is kind of expected from a smaller indie publisher launching their first game to literally hundreds of thousands of players and, possibly over 1 million at this point. So just from, going off of the player peak from a few days ago at 7:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, there were roughly 51,500 players on the US West server alone. That's just the US West server. So, and that's when people were having trouble downloading and getting into the game. And it wasn't really out publicly that it had been released. So honestly, other than the first few days of launch, the scuffedness of it, and some wonky stuttering issues, the first week of launch has been amazing. It's been incredible. Obviously there's a few bugs, few balancing issues, some stuff that needs to happen. And that's expected of a smaller indie team. But honestly, I think Ironmace has done an amazing job, an incredible job of cleaning things up as fast as possible with the resources that they have. They obviously have a lot of work to do, a lot of work ahead of them to balance stuff out and to correct some issues. But they've already addressed some things, and I'm going to be making a video about what I think needs to be fixed. But that's another topic. Kind of want to stay on the court case here. So why did Ironmace release so suddenly, and why now? So to be perfectly honest, no one really knows. We see about 10% of what's actually happening in the docket report and through news outlets. We don't have access to any financial records other than what's made publicly available. But I do have some theories, and these are my speculation. And I'm not a lawyer, but these are based on what I know, what I've researched from previous cases, and some speculation on my friends who are lawyers. They're not acting, I'm not paying them to say anything, they're not acting in a capacity of a lawyer, but that's what they do as their profession. So Ironmace was out of money, or either one of 3 things happened. Either Ironmace was out of money and needed funding to pursue the court case, which wouldn't be a good sign for Ironmace, or there might have been some significant movement on the case behind the scenes that we haven't heard about yet, such as an initial settlement agreement that might be on the table. They could have signed some. There's basically like a declaration of settle, like they're going to settle. Basically, a proposal that they could sign. Hey, yeah, we agree to settle by this time for this amount, X, Y, Z. It just hasn't been finalized by the court, and that can be done from between their lawyers. So like Ironmace's lawyers can meet up with Nexon's lawyers, and they could draft this document of what the settlement would look like. But until they give that to the judge and it's actually been finalized and processed, we would have no idea. So that is also a possibility. Or Ironmace could just feel supremely confident that they're going to win in early injunction, and don't mind risking disturbing court decorum. It's relatively common for stuff like this to happen with smaller companies. I mean, heck, even Samsung, when there was the Samsung versus Apple case, Samsung did something similar, and they're a massive company. And it is a risk of disturbing the court decorum. but yeah, it's common. And is it always the wisest course of action? Not necessarily, but sometimes it's the only course of action that's available. So in a case where it's necessary for them to get funding or for them to kind of prove that their game isn't as similar as P3 is claiming. So now there's evidence, right? Publicly available evidence that the games are completely different. So if, and it's now that the game's been fleshed out and changed significantly from what it was in playtesting, and this is the release copy, it kind of proves a point, and it could actually might be somewhat helpful to the case, even though they are risking upsetting court decorum, right? So it could be something not listed here because, again, we don't have exactly what's going on beyond the curtain, but all we can really do is speculate. Again, I'm not a lawyer. Don't take this as legal advice at all. I'm just a dude with friends who happen to be lawyers, and I do a lot of research because I'm interested. So is the judge actually going to be upset about this, or are they going to get pissed off? And what is court decorum? So there are some questions about what EA means for the case. There's all these Discord lawyers and Reddit lawyers, and I'm one of them. I'm not going to try to hide that I'm not. So they're saying that EA is going to do more harm than good, right? That people are going to get rug pulled, and the judge is going to get pissed off and basically throw the case or like side in Nexon's favor just because Ironmace released EA. That's highly unlikely and also possibly illegal. So, no, the court does its best to remain unbiased, and yes, it can get pissed off, and there are punishments for violating court decorum, but it's kind of it's kind of not relevant to some point. I'm one of the people that have said that the judge will get upset, and that it is true. The judge might get upset. It might taint their bias a little bit. But Ironmace has some kind of they have ways to correct that. Like they could ask for a new judge if they think the judge is being unbiased because of a decision that they made. So, but to understand what's going on, we kind of have to understand what court decorum is and some other issues. So court decorum, according to Cornell law, is essentially how you conduct yourself in the courtroom. So their exact phrasing is, legal representatives are expected to conduct themselves at all times in a civil and respectful manner appropriate to an administrative forum. Additionally, counsel are expected to conduct themselves at all times in a professional manner and in accordance with all applicable rules and professional conduct of the court. So that's a direct quote from Cornell law. And according to the U.S. Court of Federal Claims, which is the U.S. federal court that they're going through, the dignity of the court is to be respected and maintained at all times. So these are kind of blanket statements that say you have to treat the court with respect, right? And usually court decorum refers to things like dress code and behavior while inside the courtroom. However, court decorum, as far as I know, does apply to conduct of all parties in all issues that are related to this specific court case. So as seen in the article I posted above, I have posted below, the U.S. federal or USCFC link, a public access project, which is the National Paralegal College. Court decorum applies to things such as evidence tampering, extrajudicial statements, etc. In this case, it would be the release of early access and changing the status quo these people keep talking about for Dark and Darker. So while the status quo argument in itself is kind of nonsense, there is some merit to the thought behind it. The current standing of the case was that Dark and Darker had been publicly released through playtesting. It just had yet to charge for any product or services directly related to Dark and Darker. However, if we remember back to the coffee, Dark and Darker as the brand has charged for related merchandise, not necessarily services or products from the game, but related merchandise they already have released and charged for. This puts Dark and Darker into some kind of weird limbo where it is really up to how the judge interprets the situation, because that agreement with Madrina's Coffee or whatever it is, was done before the court case was ever a thing. Like that had already been settled upon and agreed upon before the court case existed, right? So this puts Dark and Darker into a weird limbo, because did they break court decorum by charging for early access or not? If they did, how egregious was it, and does it elicit some sort of punishment? We don't know, and there's no way to tell, right? We're not the judge, and I'm not a lawyer, and even the lawyers who are speaking about this and like summarizing some of this stuff, including my friends, don't have all the facts, right? We don't have access to everything. We don't know what the judge is thinking. We don't have access. We even like lawyers with access to Pacer, like full access to Pacer, they're not going to get everything, much more than we're going to get, because they're only, unless they have a specific case number, like a specific client number that's given to them through the courts, they can't get access to all of the information. So there's only specific tiers of information that you can get access to, and everybody except for the people working on the case don't have anything more than like 10 to 20% of what's actually going on. So no, it's impossible for anybody, including other lawyers, to know exactly what's going on. Anybody who says otherwise is either working for Nexon, working for Ironmace, or has no clue what they're talking about. So what we can do is look to what the rules of the court are, right? So what is violating court decorum? And it's, something a lot of people have at least heard about. It's called contempt of court, right? I find you in contempt, and they slam their gavel. That's what happens when you violate court decorum, is you get held in contempt of court, right? Which is a serious issue, can be a serious issue in the United States. According to the Constitution of constitution.congress.gov, the court has the authority to directly punish contempt through sanctions or orders of obstruction of justice, right? So depending on how severe the violation is or how severe the contempt is, they could go all the way through like sanctions such as fines, or just telling the lawyers to stop whatever they're doing, or some kind of court order that makes people stop, or they can actually order obstruction of justice, which is a crime, and would be very, very bad news for Ironmace if that was to happen. Again, according to Cornell law, contempt of court in civil cases has two versions. There's direct contempt and indirect contempt. I have a link posted below. This is where things get a little trickier. Indirect contempt usually carries a fine against the company or the party and forcible compliance through court orders if possible. However, contempt of court in civil cases usually requires some kind of direct court order to be in place in order for that contempt to occur. So like if the injunction had already happened and it went against Ironmace, then they released EA, they released early access, then there's a clear and decided contempt of court because there's a court order in place, and there would be financial and possibly criminal punishments involved. But there was no court order in place. There was no order for them to not do anything in place at all anywhere, except for the DMCA. And the DMCA is something that Nexon is enforcing and the other businesses are enforcing legally, but the court itself hasn't, the police, nobody's decided anything, right? So a DMCA is not a court order to stop. It's not the same thing. It's not an injunction. So you can't be, as far as I know, you can't be held in contempt of court for a DMCA, for going around a DMCA, because they're not violating anything. If they have broken any kind of laws or anything, they will be fined and punished accordingly by the judge at the end. But right now there's no court order in place that's stopping them, so it would be hard to find them in contempt of court. Sure, the judge might get pissed off all they want, and it might taint their personal bias, and if that happens, Ironmace can actually request a new judge. So while it does make this situation a little tricky, and it might make the judge upset, realistically, there's not much Nexon can do about it. They could DMCA the server hosts, but if those server hosts are located in China and it's a Chinese company or a Russian company, or any company that doesn't work with U.S. sanctions, then there's nothing Nexon can do about it. Ironmace can host the game on cloud servers through a Chinese company or a Russian company or some third party country, and still service the United States. And there's nothing that Nexon could do to DMCA to get those servers taken down, right? And it's also not violating any laws. They're just finding a way around the DMCA, which is going to piss off the court, like make them upset. But if they didn't violate court decorum, and they didn't violate a direct court order, then it's going to be very, very hard for any kind of contempt charges to come down, right? So we're not entirely sure what's going to happen. I'm not a lawyer. I think it's highly unlikely that anything other than a fine or a slap on the wrist will come from this. It is possible that IM does suffer some unknown consequences from this later down the line, or it might make things messy where Ironmace has to request a new judge and then start, it'll bog down the trial, right? But at this point, they're making an incredible amount of money. So who cares, right? Now they're in a position to where they can kind of be fine with drawing this out if need be. So, which kind of leads me into what's been going on with the court case. It's like the actual documentation itself. So to be honest, there hasn't been any new documents since the 8th. The 2 new documents that appeared on the 8th one of them was Ironmace adding more lawyers. They added another lawyer from Seattle to their team, and another was adding corporate disclosures. So what this is to me and my friends is basically a signal that discovery is moving forward. So discovery has started in some capacity, as signaled by the corporate disclosure. Usually you don't disclose your corporate, you don't do your corporate disclosure until the start of discovery unless you're asked for it. The plaintiff will have to file that sooner, but the defendant can usually hold off until discovery is started or about to start in full, right? So discovery is probably already started. Ironmace has some amount of money. Some unknown amount of money has been flowing in, like a river into Ironmace with early access. So now they can afford additional lawyers. And they hired, the day after launch, they hired a new lawyer in Seattle. And what we did learn through their corporate disclosure is that Ironmace has not sold any controlling stock in their company. At least less than 10% of Ironmace's stock has been sold total. Which means they have no parent companies, and at least according to their corporate disclosure. So they're not beholden to any investors in a controlling parent company or parent investor kind of way, right? There's no controlling members. Ironmace still controls Ironmace. Other than that, not much else has appeared. And what this really means for the case is that the stay of discovery might have been dismissed or tossed out of hand, or it is still yet to be decided upon. We might not know about that for some time. Same thing with the dismissal. If these things are kind of thrown out without prejudice with prejudice through the court, we might not see it on Pacer. It just might not pop up, right? So if we start seeing a bunch of new discovery get added to the docket, and we start seeing a bunch of new files of just them adding information, that probably means that it hasn't been dismissed and the stay of discovery didn't go through, right? But we're going to kind of have to assume that until we get an official line item on the docket that says this case has been dismissed, then we'll know, right? But if that doesn't happen, we kind of have to assume that it hasn't been. We also might not know if things get pushed back or rescheduled. So the dismissal could have been pushed back until theoretically up to the day before trial. Washington State only makes things public when they are federally mandated to do so. Nothing else, except for the bare minimum, ever makes it into our hands, which sucks. We are left in the dark. But that's just kind of how it works. Washington State only does what is federally minimum requirement for release of information. And that's, in their terms, to protect the safety of the plaintiff and the defendant, right? So their privacy. So what happens next, and what's going to happen with Dark and Darker? Is there going to be a rug pull, as some people are saying? We just kind of got to wait. We wait and play Dark and Darker while we can. There is a possibility that early access gets shut down via an injunction in Korea or the United States. Of course it's a possibility. Just like League of Legends could get sued and an injunction gets placed against them. It's not going to stop us from playing the game, right? I mean, there's a lot of other stuff that'll stop us from playing League of Legends, but like, there's always a possibility of games getting taken away. That's just the reality we live in. We don't own any of the games we play anymore. We're leasing access to it, right? So unless you have a physical copy and can download it onto your computer, you don't own access to anything, any of your games, even on Steam. But to be honest, until those decisions are made, the likelihood of a rug pull or the game being shut down is very slim. There is a chance that the servers get shut down or Ironmace is forced to stop selling new copies by Dark and Darker, or of new copies of Dark and Darker by an injunction. What an injunction decision will look like is literally impossible to know until it happens. You can speculate and say that it's unlikely, which is, in my opinion, it is very unlikely that they're going to shut down the early access through an injunction. I think a modified injunction is going to happen. I'm fairly certain of that. There are a ton of options available to the courts, and there are 2 cases involved with two very different legal systems. So all we can really do right now is be patient, have fun in the game. If you don't realistically have $50 that you can kind of just burn to play the game while we have it, don't buy it. It's $30 to $50. And if that's going to break your bank and you're going to get upset if the game does get shut down, don't get it yet. Wait until the injunctions happen. Because there is a way that the servers can get shut down through DMCAing their server hosts if they are located in America. If they're located in China or somewhere else that doesn't work with U.S. sanctions like that, then they can stay up. But if the servers are actually located in the U.S. by a U.S. and operated by a U.S. company, then they can get shut down. And an injunction would put a halt to it all unless Ironmace is willing to violate a court order, which would be very bad for them. But that's also worst case scenario. It's extremely unlikely in my opinion, but it is possible. So if you can't risk that $35 to $50, I would say hold off until we at least know about the injunctions. But that is a very unlikely situation. But just like anything else, if you don't think it's worth it to get like at least a month of playtime out of this for $35 to $50, then hold off. Wait until later, right? You'll just be better off, and you'll have more peace of mind that if an injunction comes in and it goes in favor of Ironmace, then your $35 to $50 is going to give you access to a game until at least the case is over, right? So that would be the safer bet. TLDR, quick timeline update. To summarize, early access is live. You can buy the game at darkanddarker.com and download it through their launcher. The game is $35 for the standard edition and $50 for the supporter edition. I wouldn't use Chaff Games or whatever it's called, the other option, the official partner that they've partnered with. Not only does Ironmace get less money if you buy it through them, but there has been more problems with purchasing it through them. Some people still haven't been refunded from having to purchase multiple copies, and there's other issues. But that's on Chaff Games, not on Ironmace. So just buy direct. Go to darkanddarker.com, buy the game through there. Releasing early access might get Ironmace in some trouble, maybe a fine, but we don't really know yet. And it's really unlikely that they're going to get into too much trouble from this. The court case is moving forward slowly. We won't really be getting a ton of information anytime soon, so we just got to be patient. If you do choose to buy the game, make sure you can stand to lose the $35 to $50. There's no real guarantee that the servers stay up for the duration of the court case, and there's no guarantee that they stay up after the court case is concluded. In my opinion, it's extremely unlikely that Ironmace is ordered to stop all operations, but it is possible. I think the servers are going to stay up through at least the duration of the court case, and most likely afterwards, because I think Ironmace would win that. But be careful. It's your money. Be smart about it. If you can't stand to lose it, don't spend it. I bought the game. I've had minimal issues. I've been having nothing but fun times with the boys over here. Sometimes I have rough times where I get murdered a lot, but sometimes I come out big with like 700 gold, 800 gold over the items, right? Just the nature of the game. So go out there, get the game if you can afford it. Just remember that nothing is certain as of yet. The injunctions haven't been decided yet. Nothing else has changed. There hasn't been a settlement as far as I know. So there is a slight risk that the rug gets pulled. But it's not an intentional rug pull by Ironmace by any means. It's not a scam. Yeah, that holds no merit. Ironmace is trying to put out a good game, and that's what they've done. Even if it does get pulled, it's not going to be Ironmace's fault. You know, they're listening to their lawyers and doing everything they can to get this game out to us in a safe and honest fashion. If the courts if the courts turn against them, you know, that's on the courts, and that's on Ironmace for, you know, not winning. But yeah, court cases are just like this sometimes. We just got to be patient. As always, have an awesome day. Leave a comment, like, and subscribe. Thank everybody who's a supporter and a member of the Patreon and the YouTube membership. I love you guys. Hope to see you guys in the dungeon. Join the Discord. Peace.